Carter made haste to leave the camp behind. If anything, the army was damn quick with hunting down deserters. A little voice at the back of his head tried to speak to his conscience about abandoning his comrades, but he brushed it aside. They weren't his comrades no longer. He had turned into an outcast and had been too blind to see that. Dawn broke much faster than he had been prepared for. His plan had been to reach the next camp in the same night, asking for the faces he'd seen near his burning house. Beneath him, Runner was growing tired. The large horse was used to traveling miles and miles without rest. It had been a fool's game to think he could find those men and get away all in a few hours of darkness. Funny how time seems infinite in moments of adrenaline, but it wasn't. And he had to find a place to hide and rest, or he would swing the very same day before the sun would set. "You forfeit your life, Steve," he muttered to himself with a fierce smile. Was it wise? The sudden sound of strange voices let horse and rider falter. They both pricked their ears, listening. Realizing they were coming closer, Carter decided to quickly vanish in the thicket. Finding an especially murky spot where a thick tree had fallen down, he dismounted. Vegetation didn't give much of a hiding spot to a horse, though. With gentle force, the soldier convinced Runner to lay down. The Mustang whined his disagreement, but eventually followed the command. Using the opportunity, Carter sat down next to his horse and panted. He was exhausted and hungry, but he could neither look for food nor sleep with his own troops nearby and soon looking. He had to wait until nightfall if he wanted to dare any venture. When the sun started to rise high into the sky, its warming beams felt like scorching heat to the man, sent him into a slight trance. His hand resting on Runner's head, he was barely aware of any physical sensations. He only felt the heat, like a blazing fire. Very far away at the brim of his consciousness, he could hear raging flames. "Pa! Jacob!" At once Carter sprang to his feet again, colt in hand. In the trees around he heard a mockingbird cry in mourning. He took off his hat and wiped his brow. He froze when his disoriented footsteps snapped a twig. Carter swallowed in an attempt to wetten his dry throat. He needed water. He looked at his horse. They both needed water. "You must hate me for dragging you into this mess." Runner only snorted and remained lying in the shade. Carter sighed before sitting back down. This time he did fall asleep. Death on the wind, blood in the sand. Once you have sinned, the owl will chant. A hoot woke the soldier from his death-like slumber. The sun was slowly sinking, and the last beams bathed the landscape in a golden light. He took a moment to listen for any persecutors, and when nothing stirred, he took another to gather his wits. It's easy to just make a decision that starts a mess. Taking the second step, on the other hand, could prove tricky depending on the severity of said mess. Carter took a stick to draw the approximate positions of the Union troops. He was right in the middle. He had been lucky they hadn't caught him yet. He had to get moving. Either far away or towards the man who might be responsible for his loss. The man thought for a while, trying to find the best option. In the end, he had to conclude that supplies were nowhere to be found apart from the army. Sherman left nothing but burnt earth in his wake, and he and his horse both needed supplies. What was much more important, though, was the longing to quench this burning fire inside of him. He had to see the face that had robbed him of his future. He wanted to see the light fade from the man's eyes. Carter grinned as a sudden thought crossed his mind. He needed to vanish from sight. The army would look for a captain. What he needed was a new uniform, and he knew precisely how to go about it. Carefully, Carter led Runner through the dark. He had found traces of the army in the twilight and was following the trail. They kept close to the tree line since open territory would announce their arrival to anyone guarding the camp and paying attention. When the soldier thought to see something in the distance, he took his spyglass to investigate. Night was falling, making it difficult to be certain, but the soft glow of fires indicated a camp just a few miles away. Carter withstood the urge to whip around when he felt cold steel touch his neck. "Drop it, and raise your hands." Carter dropped the spyglass, grinding his teeth. "Nice and slow," the other man added. There was the arrogance of victory in his voice, something Carter had heard often when a Confederate was taken prisoner. He hadn't appreciated it back then, and he certainly despised it now. His captor's partner held up a lantern. He studied the deserter's uniform for a moment. "Captain," he said cheerfully, "looks like we left you behind. Soldiers are already looking for you." Carter measured the man with the lantern with his eyes. He was roughly the same height, although his body was less lean and more muscular. "A fine instrument you have there," the soldier with the lantern said, picking up the spyglass. Carter felt heat rising up deep inside of him, but pushed it down. It had been a gift from his father back then, when the old man had still been in the Union Army. His father had been proud of him. They had never had a fight right up until the damn war had begun, forcing each of them to make a choice. Deep inside, Carter started to regret it. With a smug smile, the Yankee stowed the spyglass. All the while, Carter studied both men, but they didn't look familiar. The gloom, of course, did its damnedest to conceal their features. Something at the brim of his sanity told Carter that the man he was looking for was blonde. Both of these men had dark hair. "You with Sherman?" Carter asked, not bothering to hide his southern origin. Both men grinned at each other before the one with the gun answered. "We can show you," with a taunting undertone he added. "Sir?" The captured man reacted immediately. Taking the barrel, he pushed the rifle back right into the other man's face with enough force that a crunching sound came from where the nose was. The other man, still holding the lantern and nothing else, was about to draw his own pistol. In his confusion, however, he was too slow. With his fist balled, Carter punched him right in the face, whereupon the lantern fell to the ground. He punched the man again, this time in the stomach. The soldier wanted to fight back, but the air was pressed out of his lungs, causing him to fall to his knees. A kick struck the Yankee unconscious. This all happened in the blink of an eye, while the first soldier tried to find his rifle he had lost. Blood spurted through the fingers of his left hand, which covered his nose. Taking the pistol of the unconscious soldier, Carter fired 3 times. The soldier struggled for another moment. Then the body fell still. Looking around, he saw that Runner had taken off amidst the chaos. The man whistled for his horse to come back, it usually worked, and then went on to take the unconscious man's clothes, together with his own spyglass. With shame, he concluded that he now was no captain anymore, nor would he ever be again. His father had resigned from the army. He had gone with his honor intact. Carter was a deserter. He had brought disgrace upon his family. And for a short moment he wondered what his mother would say. Perhaps she would just weep. Runner came back in a steady trot, snorting into his rider's face as a way of saying sorry. Carter patted the horse before mounting. Down on the ground the other man stirred. Carter had almost forgotten about him. Taking his own pistol, Carter shot the man clean between the eyes. Runner's ears pinned back at the noise. The horse didn't like violence. Never had. Carter had bought him from a friend only shortly after the horse had been old enough to be away from his mother. He had bought him for Lisa and for his son. It had been easier for them to get around when he was away. When the war had begun, they had needed every horse they could get, and he and Lisa had agreed. "Better take him as your own horse. I don't want him to carry boxes of ammunition." Carter had wondered often if she was alright without her 4-legged helper. Now he was glad he had taken him with. The Yankees would have shot him. The camp was in deep sleep when Carter reached it. The watch himself was nodding more than he was guarding his fellow soldiers. The man had debated if he should just sneak past, but then his anger had spoken again and he had strangled the man. Stealthily he moved through the camp. Everyone was asleep, even the colored servant. The thought that Carter was at a dead end did not occur to him before. He couldn't go around asking soldiers if they had burned his house. They wouldn't know what house he meant, and his whispers as well as their struggles would wake the camp. The man made an effort to remember anything that might help him identify his family's murderers. He had been occupied with extinguishing the fire, although it had been ridiculous to try. Smoke had obscured a clear view of the already fleeing man. Carter struggled. He didn't want to go back there. He had to go back there. If he wanted closure, he had to remember. And then it came to him. One of the soldiers did have blonde hair. He had been young too. Carter was looking for blonde youth of average height and slender but not weak frame. In the tent next to the former captain, something stirred. He froze immediately in his tracks, but the sleeping soldier was obviously just dreaming, for he soon fell silent again. Carter took a closer look at those sleeping outside first, but none of those Yankees sparked his memory. He was extremely careful to avoid stepping on anything but grass. A snapping twig or a soldier turning, feeling someone standing on his uniform would lead to Carter's discovery. His own heart hammered unnaturally loud in his chest. The man almost feared that everyone else had to hear it as well. He kept his cool, however, and moved on to peek into the tents through a slit as small as possible. To his dismay, the light of the moon wasn't enough to let him see those sleeping inside. Perhaps he was in the wrong camp and the killer was somewhere else. Carter suddenly snapped into a mode of alertness when someone alarmed the camp of intruders. The former captain scolded himself as he realized that the next watch had probably found his dead comrade. Not wasting time to think, Carter took off around the tent and into the opposite direction of the calling man. Behind him, the Yankees sprang to their feet. Still disoriented from sleep, they took their guns and attempted to follow. Carter felt himself grow tired. He hadn't hitched runner, and upon a whistle, the Mustang came running at once. Just as he wanted to mount, a man tackled Carter from behind. Turning to see his attacker, he suddenly saw stars when the Yankee landed a punch. A kick sent the other man reeling for a moment, giving Carter the opportunity to get to his feet and mount, still dazed. Taking his gun, he shot the officer as he attempted to follow. Carter hadn't managed to kill him at once, but the bullets had hit the stomach several times. Not looking back, he made for the forest. Behind him, hoofs soon followed, and the occasional shot sounded. He wouldn't make it by running alone. Trees and bushes forced his companion to slow down and maneuver. In addition to that, would a one lucky shot be enough to let runner topple to the ground? "We've got to do something you won't like," he muttered to his horse. Carter himself didn't hesitate to shoot back, whilst the animal took care of the directions, but when he looked behind, his heart skipped a beat. Amongst the three riders following him was a blond man. On his uniform, the silver eagle on a blue ground glinted in the moonlight. The other man was a youth barely old enough to shave yet, 17, perhaps 18, but not older. A few years younger, and he could have been Carter's son. Yet the light green eyes blazed with venom. He might be able to seduce some poor woman with his looks, but Carter saw. He was a snake, all right. The former captain just knew that it had been him. The snake which had slipped into Carter's garden to make existence hell. The chase continued through the forest. Runner was starting to slow down. Behind, one of the Yanks fell from his horse, dead. Carter had studied the map often enough. He knew there were grasslands ahead. It would give the Mustang free range to run at full speed. He shot the last two bullets at the other soldier next to the colonel. Both missed. Coming out of the forest, Carter was thrown off when his Mustang stumbled and fell. He had been too focused on shooting and not noticed a small hole in the ground. Luckily, Runner's leg wasn't broken. With a nasty shock, the horse got up at once. Carter was prevented from jumping back on his friend's back when one bullet grazed his cheek, another the horse's flank. Dawn was breaking, making it difficult to see in the semi-darkness. The man didn't care. Taking his saber, he stormed towards the riders, who were just slowing down. Using the rider's own horse for cover, Carter swiftly dragged the Yankee down and sank his blade into the throat. The soldier was still choking to death as he moved on to the blonde colonel. The Federal only studied Carter with arrogant calmness, and for the first time the former captain could imagine what so many Confederates must have felt when being looked upon in that manner. "You were there," Carter panted. "You ran when my house burned." He pointed at the colonel, whose eyes showed he knew what the former captain meant. "You are the captain who deserted 2 days ago," the colonel remarked icily. "Seems she didn't lie after all when she told me her husband was with the Union." Stephen Carter. A taunt crept into the man's voice when he spoke the name. Carter cast a glance towards the forest when he heard more Federals not far off and hesitated. He wanted to kill that man, but he didn't want to just shoot him. Carter could risk getting caught because he wasted his time here, or he could escape the rope and fade into the background until the air was clear. Somewhere in the trees an owl hooted menacingly. "Take a good long look at me," Carter growled, "because I will come for you." The colonel showed a mocking grin and took his pistol to take aim. "Jonathan Dabney, at your service." He sneered confidently, believing Carter to be a dead man, but he hadn't survived 4 years of war for nothing. Cutting the reins, he started yelling and screaming. Dabney's horse, spooked by the sudden ruckus, reared up, throwing off its rider. Carter made for Runner's back, giving him a hard kick. Far behind, he heard more soldiers coming on foot, but the distance was too great to be hit by a bullet. They rather helped their superior than trying to catch a deserter. Dabney, that snake, was protected by the military, for now. But sooner or later this war would end. Carter would remember the name and the face. It was all he needed. Runner snorted from exhaustion. The wound on his flank was deeper than Carter had thought, but he drove him on until the sun had risen. When he felt safe enough, he dismounted, leading the Mustang. Runner followed slowly. Blood oozed out of the wound. Taking shelter close to the trees, the former captain made a fire. His horse snorted but didn't lie down, and when his rider came with a glowing knife for the wound, he shied away. Carter patted the horse's nose. "Hey, it's going to be all right." The words were barely spoken when Runner uttered a high-pitched neigh and kicked out with his hind legs. Carter paced backwards to not get hit until his friend had calmed down. Feeling his empty belly, the man sat down. Exhaustion was finally taking its toll, and he hadn't managed to steal anything from the camp.